Fun. If you ask me to describe solo leveling in one word, that's the one I'd go with, fun. Solo leveling is a lot of fun. And I think most would agree that so far, that's all this show is. An episode of solo leveling won't make you question your worldview, it won't change your life, it won't turn you into an armchair philosopher, thank God. It won't do any of that, it will simply be fun. But can a word that simple justify the immense popularity and goodwill this show has? Can a show receive hundreds of thousands of likes per episode, crash multiple streaming sites, and receive sky-high ratings everywhere simply by being fun? Or is there more to it? Well, let's talk about it. Let's try to uncover the secret behind solo leveling and its popularity. Spoiler alert, there is in fact more to it. Make sure to subscribe. For this video, I'll default to the anime because of two main reasons. One, I think the anime is more popular, although someone needs to crunch the numbers on that, and two, I think the anime is significantly better than the manhwa. And that's not just because it features top-notch production when needed. The solo leveling anime heavily expands upon the contents of the source, it changes the overall perspective, adds a bunch of anime-only stuff, and as a whole, makes the story more engaging. This is a topic I've covered in detail before. Because of this, I feel like the anime is a better representation of the title, so that's the version I'll look at. With all that out of the way, let's get to it. Let's start by answering a simple question. Why is solo leveling fun? Why is it so entertaining? Well, the short answer would be the fact that it's a power fantasy. The main character does cool things and that inherently is fun to watch. Besides that, the show features a ton of good-looking action and that too is inherently fun. And as modern philosopher Yui Hirasawa once said, fun things are fun. It's not rocket science, solo leveling does things with proven track records and reaps the benefits. But like I said near the start, that alone doesn't justify the immense popularity this show boasts. There are an n number of action-heavy power fantasies out there. Basically every other isekai fits that description, but most of them cannot touch solo leveling in terms of popularity and impact. Part of it is due to the source material, sure, the manhwa is huge, but that's not all there is to it. I think solo leveling is as well received as it is because of the combined effect of two factors. One, its ability to strike the perfect balance between self-indulgent power fantasy tropes and an all-around decent story, and two, its production value. The appeal comes from the way these two factors play off each other and create a story that's more than the sum of its parts. We'll go through these factors first and then talk about how they collectively make solo leveling so universally enjoyable. Let's start with the obvious one. Solo leveling as a whole looks and sounds great. The team has clearly put a lot of love and effort into it. I have in the past gone on about how important good action animation is for an action anime. It's the beating heart, it's the selling point, it's the conduit that brings the story to life. The absence of good action animation can cripple an action anime, regardless of how well written it is. Production value is immensely important, especially for an action-heavy show. Now yes, solo leveling is not a Mob Psycho or a Jujutsu Kaisen in terms of production value, but it is significantly better than the industry average. As a whole, it looks great. Sure, not every fight looks spectacular, but there are plenty of spectacular fights. Not every drawing looks strong, but there are plenty of strong drawings, you get the idea. The soundtrack created by the one and only Hiroyuki Sawano is great as well. I don't know how they got Sawano to lock in for a non-Tetsuro Araki project, but I'm glad they did. These factors collectively elevate the show. Think of how much the soundtrack Dark Aria added to episode 6. Think of how energetic and impactful the animation quality made episode 11 feel. Think of how cool episode 6 was, again due to the animation and the soundtrack. Of course, the voice acting work is remarkable as well. The all-around production makes scenes and fights feel more important, and that's crucial. Solo leveling features a plethora of fights, and most of them aren't exactly masterclasses of writing. Sung fights monsters, Sung wins, stronger Sung fights stronger monsters, stronger Sung wins, and repeat. That's what most, not all, most of the action from this show is like. The selling point in most cases isn't the context behind the fights, it's the execution, the hype, the choreography, etc. And strong production makes those aspects stand out. All of that, of course, is common knowledge. Anyone with with working eyes and ears could figure that out. The more cryptic reason behind this show's success is its writing and the way the writing exploits the positives of the power fantasy genre without falling victim to the negatives. Let me elaborate. Power fantasies at their best are appealing because they allow for a certain degree of self-insertion and wish fulfillment. I know that sounds sad, but that stuff appeals to a wide audience. The problem, however, is that it's very easy for an author to get carried away. A work might be too indulgent or too straightforward to the point where it feels purposeless. Your typical power fantasy tends to feel cheap, feel unimportant, but that's not the case with Solo Leveling. Some might say it is, but I, and based on the numbers this show does, many more disagree. Let me use an analogy here. Solo Leveling, this will sound like an insult, but it's not, I promise. Solo Leveling is junk food, it's McDonald's. I know that sounds bad, but stay with me. Solo Leveling is fast food, while your typical power fantasy anime is just pure oil and grease. It's raw sugar. There's no technique to it, nothing to convert that oil and that sugar and whatnot into food. Solo Leveling, on the other hand, is a fresh off the grill, fully cooked fast food meal, perhaps from one of those nicer places instead of McDonald's. Why is that? Because it doesn't just rely on power fantasy tropes. It takes power fantasy ingredients and uses battle shonen utensils to cook them. Alright, that food analogy is getting out of hand, I'll stop. Basically, it doesn't just borrow from the power fantasy genre, it also incorporates battle shonen elements into the story. In a way, it ends up being the best of both worlds. To simplify things even further, in case that long-winded food analogy was too much for you, Solo Leveling doesn't just rely on the power fantasy trope of a protagonist being overpowered. It pairs that with the immensely popular battle shonen trait of a protagonist having to grind and struggle in an effort to become stronger. And that right there is one of the secret ingredients. Wait, that was another food analogy, wasn't it? Let me ask you this. What's the biggest problem with a power fantasy protagonist? In my opinion, it's the fact that his or her, mostly his to be honest, powers and achievements don't feel deserved. He's cool, sure, but that's all there is to it. On the other hand, one of the biggest problems with a typical battle shonen protagonist is how straightforward, simple-minded, and hot-headed he is. I personally find most shonen main characters to be lame, which makes sense because I'm not exactly the target audience. By borrowing from both power fantasy and battle shonen, Solo Leveling manages to craft a hybrid protagonist. Sunjinwoo is incredibly cool, he's fun to watch, he's level-headed, but at the same time he is somewhat compelling. We saw him claw his way up from nothing, we saw him nearly die multiple times. Of course, that doesn't mean Sung is up there with the best written protagonists, not even close, but he is an entertaining character. As for the story itself, Solo Leveling is incredibly straightforward. Of course, the narrative will get more complex as the story progresses, but at no point will it end up being an Attack on Titan-esque mindfuck. I've said this before, Solo Leveling knows exactly what it is and it plays its cards accordingly. It knows what the fans want, but at the same time it knows that giving them too much will make the story feel cheap. And that's a big thing. Solo Leveling gives you what you want, but it does so at the right time. Sung Jin-woo is extremely strong, yes, but that wasn't always the case. Even after reawakening, Sung got his rear end handed to him on multiple occasions. He won the fights he was in, but he did so by the skin of his teeth. The story portrays Sung as both invincible and as an underdog, again the best of both worlds. That, coupled with the production value and the incredibly well structured and choreographed action, makes the fights really entertaining to watch. Alright, those were the two factors, but like I said near the start, there's more to it. What I talked about so far explains why Solo Leveling is fun. It doesn't explain why the show is as popular as it is. It doesn't explain why so many around the world are genuinely, unironically, and earnestly enjoying it. So why is it, and why are they? Well, the answer is actually really simple. Like really f***ing simple. People watch anime, a form of entertainment, with the intention of being entertained. That's it. The main goal is to be entertained. However, it is difficult to be entertained by a show that's clearly trying way too hard to be entertaining. Doing so makes the audience feel like their intelligence is being insulted. Most power fantasy shows fit that description. They are so dead set on creating an invincible, all-powerful protagonist that they forget to craft a cohesive story or a character arc of any kind. And that's where Solo Leveling comes in. It creates a straightforward, simple, but ultimately cohesive story. It creates character dynamics, it creates a character arc. An extremely simple one, yes, but an arc nonetheless. That's better than nothing. By doing the bare minimum in these departments, the show quietly tells the audience that it's okay to like it. And by doing so, it unlocks its true potential. It relies on the audience's inherent desire to watch a simple, straightforward, action-heavy story and fixes up any loose ends that might make it feel too self-inserty or too wish-fulfillment-y. Neither of those are real words, but I hope you understand my point. What happens when you take a work that's excellent as a power fantasy and possible as a regular story? You get Solo Leveling, a guilty pleasure with very little guilt involved. Fans who watch anime with the intention of being entertained, which I hope is the vast majority, are entertained by Solo Leveling. The numbers don't lie. Even if you aren't crazy about it, I think most of you can agree that it's a fun show and that there's nothing explicitly wrong with it. The only people who outright hate Solo Leveling based on my limited experience being on the internet are those pseudo-intellectual elitist types. Here's the thing, I hate to be that guy. I hate to be all, oh, my taste is superior to yours. I know my channel name suggests otherwise, but it's true. I don't like saying stuff like that, but I'll make an exception. Chances are I've seen and read a lot more than you, regardless of the genre and regardless of who you is. With that in mind, all I'll say is that it's okay to simply enjoy a show. It's okay to just sit down and have fun. Not every show needs to make you rethink your entire worldview. Solo Leveling in particular does much of the work by eliminating the mistakes many of its contemporaries make. You don't need to look past anything to enjoy the show. You don't need to make any exceptions. You can simply put it on and enjoy. Hating on it or pretending that a show like it is beneath you doesn't make you an intellectual. Last time I checked, fun is in fact legal. That's about it. Liked the video? Check out this other bit of content on screen. Like and subscribe, and until next time.